All right, here we go. Hello, Athens, Georgia. It's Eric Hoyt here. As you watch this video, I am most likely in a hotel room in Colorado trying to put on an ill-fitting tuxedo. That's right, my best friend, Jake Goldstein, is getting married, happens to be getting married this weekend, so I'm very sorry I can't be there with you in person, but I'm glad to be able to produce this video of my research and give it as a talk. So I'll introduce what this presentation is about in a way that's comprehensible to those of you who may be watching on YouTube. Yes, all 7 of you, 4 of whom clicked on this video on accident. But this video is part of the Peabody Archive Symposium, and I feel very fortunate to be part of this group. We're a group of professors who've gathered at the University of Georgia, which hosts the Peabody Awards, to take a look at their archive and think about how we can explore it and do more with it to tell the story of American TV history. The Peabody Archives is a tremendous collection because they have over 90,000 media artifacts that have been sent in. So these are all the submissions that have gone to Peabody since the awards have been in creation since 1941. So they include radio broadcasts and TV tapes, books and pamphlets and supporting documents, things that help make the case to the Peabody Awards Board for why this particular work really matters, why it's significant and why it should receive an award. So it's a tremendous collection and archive. But one thing I've learned from my own work, working on archives, helping to build collections, especially digital collections, is that you need a way to organize them. And so a lot of what I'm going to be working with today and doing involves not so much even the shows, the radio kind of sounds that command our attention from the archive, but actually the database and data sets and looking for patterns using metadata. So let's get going. This particular talk is going to have 3 parts. We're going to start off talking a bit about the methods, that I've used looking at this data and metadata. Second, we'll take a look at trends across time and what we can tell using the Peabody metadata. And third, we will look for trends in time, but also in space, and so adding a spatial element. Part 1, let's talk about methods and the methods we're using. And I situate the methodology we're using here today within metadata analysis. And this is something that I played around with and worked on with my team on Project Arclight. And if you are able to take a look at the book that we put out, there's actually a great chapter by Derek Long talking about this and really trying to make the point that what you can do when you have these kind of data sets, when you have a lot of information, is start to look for some general trends. And then from there, you can sort of formulate questions that you would have never thought to ask otherwise, and begin to investigate them. So that was very much my process here. And I was grateful to receive just a tremendous data set, okay? So like any data set, it's important to talk about what is included and what's excluded. So let's do that. To be clear, the data set I'm working with in this particular presentation and project is a subset of the entire Peabody Submissions Awards. So this is the data set of local TV station submissions from the top 100 markets across 10 submission categories. Okay, so that in turn means the data set excludes quite a number of things. It excludes submissions from national networks, cable channels, syndicators, international broadcasters. It excludes submissions from markets that are not in the top 100. It excludes submissions from other media, like radio, that aren't television. It also excludes any submissions that are not part of these particular 10 categories of submission that were tracked. And it excludes any submissions that just have not been cataloged by the archive. But even with those exclusions, it's still giving us a lot. And it's here too that even before we really get into the analysis, I just want to give a huge thank you and shout out to the people who really did the hard work creating this data. So, first and foremost, it has to start with acknowledging the labor of the archivists who accept this material, who process it, led by Mary Miller and Ruta Abelins there at the University of Georgia. And then also a huge thanks to Lucas Halton and Ethan Thompson for organizing this data within Excel, making it really quite easy to analyze it. Like, The truth is, like about 95% of the labor goes into structuring and organizing data like this, and then about 5% of the labor gets to be kind of these fun analytical explorations. So thank you, Mary, Ruta, Ethan, and Lucas, because without you, none of what follows would be possible. And also, you're not responsible, by the way, if all the conclusions in the rest of this presentation are really dull or boring. Okay, let's use this data. So what can you do with it? I mean, one thing you can do, and that computers are really good at, is count. And so a lot of what I was doing initially is just counting, starting with submissions by year. And right now, what I'm going to put up is a graph. And on this graph you see is submissions by a year. And I just did it as a very simple line graph to look for trends when it increases. And you see, a tremendous increase, right? This big spike beginning in the mid-70s and extending really through the 1980s. That there's a lot more submissions that Peabody is getting from local TV stations in the top 100 markets those years. Now, what explains that? To try to begin to answer that, I changed from visualizing this as just that simple line graph into looking at it as a stacked graph. And the stacks are different submission categories. And what that reveals is that the bulk of this increase in submissions from the mid-70s through the 80s is coming in one particular category, and that's news. So news is represented here in the blue. You see a big increase starting around 1975 and then going up from there. 1978 was the year that Peabody Awards introduced the documentary category, and right off the bat, that category gets a lot of submissions too. So as you see news go down a little bit, one hypothesis could be that some of the things that were being submitted for the news category are now being submitted into documentary. But there's another hypothesis and possible explanation too, and this links pretty well with some of the scholarly literature about local news in the late 70s through the early 80s, that a number of TV stations found their news divisions to be way more profitable than they could have even hoped. And as a result, there was a great deal of competition within markets across different news divisions. And as another result, what was produced was not always the greatest journalism in the world. There was a pressure to create news personalities, the Ron Burgundys out there, as well as to give kind of a happy spin to any number of stories. And that could be in part why you see this dip in the early 80s, where in the 70s, late 70s, these news divisions are growing and they're really proud about the work they're making. And then perhaps by the 80s, you see, in a number of different markets, more of a turn away from doing ambitious TV programming on the news level, that they're more content to just try to attract viewers and let the dollars roll in. So that's one hypothesis, and we could spend a lot more time looking into that and investigating news history. But instead, I want to look into another question. In looking for trends across space, I was really on the hunt for outliers. I was interested in particularly small market stations that were submitting way more of their work for awards each year than we would expect just based on their size. So the way I tried to identify these stations was by a somewhat crude math equation. I subtracted one ranking from another, and then that gave me a third ranking. So let me walk you through that. Start with the ranking of markets by size. So New York City is number one, and then from there you get the rest of the markets, again, by total size. Then there's a second ranking, and that's the ranking by volume of submissions. And here, for instance, New York City is also number one. They submitted more to Peabody than any other local market. And when we then sort of use that together, right, we do the market size minus the ranking by submission volume. That gives us a new number, and New York City comes out as a 0, which is to say it's not surprising. It's not surprising at all that the biggest market in the US would also submit the most stuff. Okay, so I applied this, again, crude system to everything, and the results were interesting. So toward the top, as you can see here, you get quite a few college towns that come out highly, including the one that I'm broadcasting from. And then you sort of, as you look toward the bottom, it's kind of harder, I think, to find a clear pattern. I mean, one of the first cities I went to look for was toward the bottom. That's my hometown city, Kansas City. City I love Kansas City, love the Kansas City Royals baseball team. I mean, like, really love them. Was dressed in my regalia last year as they were in the World Series type love. Yeah, but even I have to acknowledge that the great city of Kansas City was not cutting it when it came to Peabody submissions. They came out as 83rd in this list, this ranking. Something was missing, or put another way, something was going on in a lot of other markets that drove them to submit more than Kansas City. And as a counterexample, we need look no further than Wichita, Kansas, which is about a 3-hour drive from Kansas City. And my partner in making this video today is Taylor Cole Miller. Taylor is also a Kansan. And Taylor, I'd just like to get your take on this. Come on over. When I say Wichita, Kansas, tell me your 3 favorite things about it. Yeah, see, I mean, that's, they have a zoo. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the reaction I was expecting, having visited Wichita a few times myself. But let's give Wichita a huge amount of credit. They came out, again, through this particular ranking system as number 13. That they were really overperforming when it came to doing ambitious TV work and then submitting it for Peabody Awards. For those of you who were at the first Peabody Symposium, we remember one of these submissions very well. Otto from Outer Space, the 1958 submission from station KRD in Wichita. The particular episode, I believe, was Otto Visits the Netherlands. Here, let's play the clip.
Oh, it's just awful, the way they keep pumping the water out. Awful? If the windmill stopped pumping or the dikes broke, it would be awful. No, it all depends on your point of view.
You know, I'll be perfectly honest. The first time that I watched this, I almost fell out of my chair laughing. But I've rewatched it. I've rewatched it a couple of times. And you know what? Now I think Otto from Outer Space is great. I mean, here you had a local NBC affiliate station in Wichita that was trying to do something really ambitious and quality for kids, but also playing very much into the post-World War II desire for more global understanding. It's Otto's visiting the Netherlands. It's introducing the children of Wichita, Kansas to another culture. Why was Wichita doing this kind of ambitious TV work? I mean, I'm still interested in that. I'm still interested in what made that particular market do this work and keep submitting it for Peabody Awards at a volume that any number of other Midwestern towns, industrial cities like Wichita were not doing. I don't know the answer. I don't have access to the archives of those stations. But I do have access to the archive here in Madison, Wisconsin for WHA. One interesting fact about WHA is that it originated as station 9XM, which, as it says on this plaque on the building where I work, Vilas Hall, was the nation's first broadcasting station. And that fact is indisputable. Right, Michelle Helms? So with my proximity to the WHA archives, which are here at the University of Wisconsin, I walked over across campus to that particular archive, and I just started looking at some boxes that seemed like they might be relevant. What's interesting about WHA as a Madison station that submitted to Peabody Archives was that they won one of the first Peabody Awards. Okay, so WHA won a Peabody in 1942, and they kept applying for Peabodys in the mid-40s. And then, starting in 1947, they stopped. and they don't apply for any more Peabody Awards until 1967. So this became part of what I was interested in. What's going on at WHA? What makes them all of a sudden in the late 1960s start submitting both radio and TV broadcasts again for Peabody considerations? And there's no real single answer I found in looking at the papers, but what I did begin to see was something of a shift and turn from this particular station really conceiving of itself as an extension of the University of Wisconsin, which it was, to playing a different kind of role as a public broadcaster that was part of the growing network of public broadcasting, and as also sort of a bigger player when it came to acquiring external grants. So we took a look at a really remarkable production from WHA as part of the first Peabody Symposium. That was Portrait of the Police, drawn by a city, which was aired on WHA in early 1969. This came on the heels of quite a bit of unrest here in the city of Madison, where there were student protests violently broken up by police, and also a really poor record of policing in minority communities. There was not a single black cop on the force during the time that this TV special was conceived. And what was interesting in looking at the kind of the history of the special was it was a total outlier for the station. In fact, the project was brought to them by the city, which had itself gotten a federal grant. But they did it, they were very proud of it, they submitted it for a Peabody Award, and from there they started to do more socially engaged and focused productions. They received a $200,000 grant from the Ford Foundation to do a segment of news that would be sort of explicitly about news being presented from the point of view of community members who don't usually have access to being the ones presenting the news. And so applying for Peabody's was very much part of the same turn that involved going to external institutions looking for funds and really reconceiving what that station's mission was. Now here's another question you might be asking. What was the least productive of the top 100 markets when it came to submitting their material for the Peabody Awards? The answer, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, when you combine it with Scranton to be the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton market. 3 submissions for Peabody Awards over more than a 50-year period. I'm just going to let you think about that one. All right, so let's wrap up. And I want to leave you with 3 takeaway points. The first comes back to the method that we're using, that I would really love to see media studies continue to use and use more these forms of metadata analysis. I think what they do at their best is point you in interesting directions and toward things, help formulate questions that you otherwise would not have thought to ask. And I'll also just point out that this data seldom comes to you so neatly wrapped up as it did to me. And so huge thanks to Mary, Ruta, Lucas, Ethan for all their work in preparing this. Second takeaway point, that once you get those ideas, right, once you're starting to look for the questions, the explanations are not going to be found just in the numbers alone. That instead you need to get out there and really use the archives to try to figure out what's going on. Third takeaway point, and this is one that I'm still sort of trying to articulate, and I'd love your feedback on it. But I think as we try to understand why we see these shifts and patterns we do, one explanation that might unite many different stories of the stations has to do with the role that institutions play, particularly nonprofit institutions. And again, it was really striking to me seeing all these discussions of the Ford Foundation, of other forms of federal grants that were being sought after by the station WHA, and the Peabody Awards too, as an institution, played an important role in terms of sort of, I think, encouraging, incentivizing local TV stations to do really good work. And I think Peabody continues to have an important role to play in that regard too. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you so much for listening, and I would love to hear your thoughts. And a huge thanks to the man behind the camera, Taylor Cole Miller, who has shot this, is helping me edit it, and is an expert of the state of Kansas, including Wichita. All right, bye.